Lucas Hargrove stood in the grand foyer of Hargrove and Company, a furniture manufacturing company that had been in his family for generations. The glistening glass windows reflected the morning sun, casting a warm glow on the polished floors. Lucas had always been driven by the belief that efficiency was the key to success, a mantra he'd inherited from his late father. However, he was also keenly aware that the world of business was ruthless, a place where compassion often took a back seat to profit margins. It was a chilly Tuesday morning when he arrived at the office, a stack of reports in hand. His colleagues scurried around him, each engrossed in their own tasks. Lucas barely registered the familiar faces. They were just another part of the machinery that kept the company running smoothly. As he settled into his sleek, modern office, he couldn't shake the feeling that changes were necessary. The company had seen better days, and Lucas was determined to restore its former glory, even if that meant making tough decisions. After reviewing the financial reports, a thought struck him. Why maintain employees who weren't contributing significantly to the bottom line? The idea of cutting costs resonated with him, and he felt a surge of confidence as he envisioned a streamlined operation, free of dead weight. He gathered his management team for a meeting, determined to discuss his vision. As the meeting commenced, Lucas laid out his plan. "We need to reduce expenses across the board," he asserted, his voice steady and authoritative. "It's clear that some of our long-term employees are no longer justifying their salaries. We can't afford to keep people around who aren't contributing to our profitability." His tone left no room for dissent. His colleagues exchanged uneasy glances. Among them was Peter, a seasoned manager who had seen many ups and downs in the company. "Lucas, some of these employees have been with us for decades. They bring experience and loyalty," he cautioned, hoping to sway his young boss. But Lucas brushed off the concern. "Loyalty doesn't pay the bills, Peter. We need to be practical. It's time to make some cuts." He continued to press for action, and the hesitance in the room morphed into a quiet consensus. The decision was made. They would compile a list of employees considered non-essential, and Margaret, a long-serving janitor, was at the top of that list. Margaret Thompson was 62 years old, and she had dedicated nearly 3 decades to Hargrove and Company. With her silver hair neatly tied back and a gentle smile that greeted everyone each morning, she was a familiar presence in the bustling office. Yet, to Lucas, she was just another name on a spreadsheet, a statistic rather than a person. He had never taken the time to understand her story or the significance she held within the company. Hours later, as Margaret diligently cleaned the expansive lobby, she sensed a shift in the atmosphere. The usual buzz of conversation seemed muted, and the laughter that typically echoed through the halls was replaced by an uneasy silence. Little did she know that her years of service were about to be erased with a single decision made by a man who barely knew her name. When Lucas walked through the lobby that afternoon, he spotted her with her cleaning supplies. "You shouldn't be here much longer," he remarked casually, a hint of coldness in his tone. "We're streamlining operations, and your position is being eliminated." Margaret froze, her heart sinking at his words. "But I've always done my job well," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I've been here for so long." Lucas interrupted her, shrugging off her protests. "Look, it's just business. You'll get your severance package. I'm sure you'll find something else." He turned away, leaving Margaret stunned, her hands trembling around the cleaning cloth. Unbeknownst to Lucas, this moment would set off a chain of events that would alter both of their lives forever. Margaret wasn't just another employee. She was the first person his father had entrusted with the company's legacy. Her departure would not go unnoticed, and the repercussions of his actions would ripple through the organization, revealing the fragile ties that held it together. As Lucas walked away, the weight of his decision hung in the air, an ominous prelude to the storm that was about to break. The path ahead was about to become far more complicated than he could have ever anticipated. In the following days, the atmosphere at Hargrove and Company grew thick with tension. Lucas Hargrove, oblivious to the growing discontent among his employees, focused solely on his agenda to revitalize the company's finances. He believed that cutting costs was a solution to all their problems, yet the decision to lay off Margaret Thompson loomed over him like a dark cloud, casting shadows on his ambitions. Margaret's dismissal was not just a statistic. It was a betrayal of the company's values, a betrayal that resonated deeply among the older employees. They were the backbone of Hargrove and Company, the ones who had weathered economic storms and celebrated triumphs together. As they whispered among themselves, the camaraderie forged over decades began to fray, replaced by an unsettling sense of unease. Lucas held meetings to discuss new strategies, presenting bold ideas to revive the company. He spoke confidently about cutting-edge designs and innovative marketing approaches. Yet, his colleagues noticed a growing disconnect between his vision and the lived reality of those who had devoted their lives to the company. The newer employees were enthusiastic, but the veterans were skeptical, feeling sidelined and unappreciated. One afternoon, Peter, the seasoned manager, approached Lucas after a particularly tense meeting. "I think we need to address the morale in the office," he suggested cautiously. "Laying off Margaret has created a rift. People are afraid and uncertain about their future." Lucas, still caught up in his plans, brushed aside Peter's concerns. "We need to focus on results, not emotions," he replied curtly. "This is business. Everyone should understand that." Yet, deep down, he felt a flicker of doubt. He couldn't shake the feeling that perhaps he was overlooking something important. As the days turned into weeks, the signs of unrest became more apparent. Employees began to take longer breaks, avoiding the common areas where they once gathered. The laughter and lighthearted banter that used to fill the hallways were replaced by hushed conversations and sidelong glances. Lucas noticed these changes, but attributed them to the normal fluctuations of corporate life. He was convinced that once profits increased, everything would return to normal. However, what Lucas failed to recognize was the power of loyalty and the history that each employee carried with them. Margaret was not just a cleaner. She was a custodian of stories, a living archive of the company's legacy. She had seen the company grow from a small workshop to a well-respected name in the industry. The bonds formed over the years were not easily severed, and her absence left a void that no amount of financial restructuring could fill. During a chance encounter in the break room, Lucas overheard two employees discussing their fears about the future. "If they could do that to Margaret, who's next?" one murmured, anxiety lacing their voice. Lucas felt a pang of unease, but he quickly dismissed it. "This is the way the world works," he muttered to himself, struggling to silence the nagging doubt that crept into his mind. Meanwhile, Margaret, despite her initial shock, began to channel her feelings into action. With a heavy heart, she decided to reach out to former colleagues. She organized small gatherings at her home to offer support to those who were feeling lost. As she shared stories of the good old days, she inspired a sense of resilience among her friends. They remembered the hard work and dedication that built Hargrove and Company together, and with each meeting, they rekindled the spirit of unity that Lucas had inadvertently tried to extinguish. As the weeks passed, Lucas continued with his aggressive business tactics, unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. Sales began to dip, and he couldn't understand why. He focused on metrics, spreadsheets, and projections, while the pulse of the company's culture slipped away unnoticed. The connections that once thrived on mutual respect and shared history were now strained, and he stood at the helm of a ship losing its direction. The root of the problem was becoming increasingly clear. It was not just about profits. It was about the people who made up the heart of Hargrove and Company. As Lucas prepared for another round of meetings to address what he perceived as mere financial setbacks, he was about to face the harsh reality that his decisions were not just business moves. They were personal betrayals. The consequences of his actions were slowly surfacing, and he would soon discover that ignoring the human element in his quest for success would lead to profound repercussions. As the days turned into weeks, the atmosphere at Hargrove and Company grew increasingly palpable with tension. Lucas Hargrove, still convinced that his business acumen could solve every problem, overlooked the subtle signs of discontent simmering just beneath the surface. Employees who once collaborated seamlessly were now hesitant, exchanging nervous glances in the hallways, where laughter used to echo. Lucas held frequent meetings to discuss progress and new strategies, but the enthusiasm he expected from his team was noticeably absent. Instead of the spirited debates and brainstorming sessions that characterized past gatherings, silence hung in the air, punctuated only by the sound of pens scratching on paper. Lucas's enthusiasm for his ambitious plans clashed with the somber mood of the room, leaving him frustrated and confused. "Why are we not seeing the results we anticipated?" he asked one afternoon, his voice laced with irritation. "We should be thriving by now." His gaze swept across the table, landing on Peter, who had been quiet for far too long. Peter cleared his throat, a pained expression on his face. "Lucas, I think it's time we address the elephant in the room. The way we let Margaret go has left many people feeling unsettled. They're worried about their jobs and the direction of the company." Lucas scoffed, dismissing Peter's concerns with a wave of his hand. "We need to be pragmatic. This is business, not a charity. If they can't handle the pressure, maybe they don't belong here." The words hung in the air, heavy and cold. Lucas couldn't see the harm in his approach, convinced that results were the only thing that mattered. As the weeks rolled on, the discomfort escalated into palpable fear. Employees began to withdraw, isolating themselves in their cubicles, avoiding conversations in the break room, and refraining from socializing. The once vibrant workplace had turned into a ghost town, and Lucas remained blissfully ignorant of the damage he had inflicted. He noticed that productivity was dipping, but he attributed it to a temporary slump, rather than a crisis of morale. Amidst this turmoil, Margaret was finding her footing outside of Hargrove and Company. Though she missed the routine and camaraderie, she discovered a sense of purpose in organizing community workshops, teaching others the skills she had honed over the years. With each gathering, she cultivated a supportive network of former employees, all of whom felt abandoned by the company they had dedicated their lives to. One afternoon, as Lucas walked through the halls, he overheard snippets of conversation that piqued his interest. "I can't believe they would do that to someone who gave so much," one employee whispered. Another chimed in, "If they can cut someone like Margaret, what's stopping them from cutting us?" Lucas's heart sank at the realization that his decisions were not merely numbers on a page. They had real, human consequences. The next day, he called for another team meeting, determined to restore morale. "We need to stay focused and work harder," he began, attempting to rally the troops. But his words fell flat, meeting only a wall of stoic expressions. The disconnect between his intentions and the team's feelings was glaringly evident. As the meeting wore on, Lucas noticed that the energy in the room was different. Where there used to be collaboration, there was now a sense of resignation. Employees shuffled papers, avoiding eye contact, as if the very act of acknowledging his presence would somehow legitimize the turmoil. That evening, Lucas found himself unable to shake the feeling of unease that had settled in his gut. He glanced out the large windows of his office, observing the city lights twinkling against the darkening sky. For the first time, he wondered if his pursuit of profit had overshadowed the fundamental principles of leadership. In an attempt to regain control, he devised a plan to implement a team-building retreat, hoping to mend the frayed bonds within his workforce. "Maybe this will bring everyone back together," he thought optimistically. But deep down, he still clung to the belief that productivity could be forced rather than nurtured. Yet, Margaret's influence was subtly weaving through the fabric of the company, even in her absence. Employees began sharing their stories of loyalty and dedication, and as they reminisced about the past, a collective resolve started to form. The discomfort that permeated the air was transforming into a sense of unity among those left behind, igniting a quiet rebellion against the culture Lucas had inadvertently fostered. As the retreat approached, Lucas remained oblivious to the fact that the very foundation of Hargrove and Company was shifting beneath his feet. The battle lines were being drawn, and he was about to confront a challenge far greater than any fiscal report could reveal. The legacy of his father and the company's true spirit were at stake, and the realization of this truth would soon come crashing down upon him. The day of the team-building retreat arrived, and Lucas Hargrove entered the expansive conference room with a mixture of hope and apprehension. He had envisioned this gathering as a turning point, a chance to rekindle camaraderie and boost morale among his employees. The room was decorated with motivational posters, and a fresh coffee station filled the air with a comforting aroma. Yet, as he surveyed the faces of his team, he felt a twinge of doubt. The anticipation he had hoped to see was absent, replaced by a hesitance that hung like a fog. As the retreat commenced, Lucas tried to engage his team with icebreakers and lighthearted activities, but the energy was low. Employees exchanged polite smiles, but there was no genuine enthusiasm. Lucas felt increasingly isolated as he attempted to lead discussions about teamwork and shared goals. The disconnect between his vision and the reality in the room grew more apparent with each passing minute. He was determined to break through the wall of indifference, but nothing seemed to work. In a moment of frustration, Lucas decided to break from the scripted agenda and encourage open dialogue. "Let's talk about what's bothering us. What can we do to improve our work environment?" he prompted, hoping to spark a real conversation. The room fell silent, and he could sense the tension coiling tighter. Finally, Peter, the seasoned manager, raised his hand hesitantly. "Lucas," he began carefully, "I think it's important we acknowledge what happened with Margaret. Her departure affected us all more than you might realize." The words hung in the air like a pendulum, swinging between discomfort and acknowledgement. Lucas's heart raced. This was the moment he had dreaded. Margaret was just another employee. Lucas replied defensively, though a part of him felt the weight of his own words. "We had to make hard choices for the business." But even as he spoke, he sensed that this explanation was hollow. The room remained silent, and he could see the disappointment in his colleagues' eyes. They wanted more than just an excuse. They wanted empathy. Peter pressed on, his voice steady. "She dedicated over 30 years to this company. She wasn't just another number. Her legacy matters." As Lucas absorbed Peter's words, a flicker of realization ignited within him. He had dismissed not only Margaret's contribution, but also the deep-rooted connections his employees had with one another and the company itself. Later that evening, Lucas found himself alone in his office, staring at the financial reports he had previously felt so confident about. He suddenly felt a pang of regret. He thought back to his father, who had always emphasized the importance of people over profits. A familiar unease settled in his chest as he realized he had strayed far from those values. The following day, a sense of urgency compelled Lucas to act. He decided to reach out to Margaret, hoping to understand her side of the story and perhaps to make amends. He gathered her contact information from Peter, his fingers trembling as he dialed her number. After a few rings, her soft voice answered. "Hello." Margaret sounded surprised yet cautious. "Margaret, this is Lucas Hargrove. I know it's been a while, and I wanted to talk," he began, his heart pounding. "I realize now that I didn't appreciate your contributions to the company. I want to understand how your departure affected you and the team." For a moment, there was silence on the other end of the line. "Thank you for calling, Lucas," she finally replied, her tone softening. "I appreciate that you want to talk. I'll be honest, it hurt deeply to be let go after all those years. But I've been working to rebuild and find new purpose." As they spoke, Lucas listened intently, absorbing every word. Margaret shared her feelings about being dismissed and how her years at Hargrove and Company had shaped her life. He felt a growing sense of empathy and guilt. Her story was not just about loss, but about resilience and community. "You're not just a name on a spreadsheet," she said gently. "You're carrying forward a legacy. Your father valued people, and I believe you can do the same." With each passing moment, Lucas felt the pieces of a larger puzzle falling into place. He understood that the company's spirit was not merely defined by profit margins, but by the people who had built it. Margaret's words ignited something in him, a desire to reconnect with the company's roots and honor the legacy his father had established. The conversation ended with an invitation to meet. As Lucas hung up the phone, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He was determined to make things right, not only for Margaret but for the entire team. The upcoming weeks would require genuine effort, a willingness to listen, and a commitment to change. Little did he know, this journey of redemption would lead him to face the consequences of his earlier choices head-on, setting the stage for a reckoning that would challenge everything he thought he knew about leadership and legacy. As Lucas Hargrove embarked on his journey of reconciliation, he quickly realized that the damage inflicted upon Hargrove and Company was far deeper than he had initially perceived. While he sought to reestablish relationships and foster an environment of mutual respect, the ripple effects of Margaret's dismissal were undeniable. Employees who had once felt secure and valued now walked the halls with an air of uncertainty, and morale plummeted as tensions mounted. Despite Lucas's attempts to shift the company culture, productivity continued to wane. Reports flooded in, reflecting a disheartening decline in sales and an uptick in employee turnover. What Lucas had viewed as mere statistics now felt like a profound loss, a testament to the fallout from his decisions. He couldn't shake the nagging feeling that the company's spirit was slipping away from him, leaving behind only cold figures on a page. One afternoon, Lucas convened another meeting, this time aimed at addressing employee concerns more directly. He entered the conference room, determined to initiate an open dialogue. "I want us to be honest with each other," he began, scanning the faces of his colleagues, who seemed more apprehensive than ever. "Let's talk about what's really happening here." Silence filled the room, thick and heavy, until finally one brave employee, Samantha, spoke up. "Lucas, we need to feel valued again. Margaret's departure left many of us feeling like we don't matter." The words hung in the air, resonating with unspoken fears among the team. Lucas felt his heart sink, realizing the gravity of their emotions. He had been so focused on financial metrics that he had neglected the very essence of what made Hargrove and Company successful. "It's people. I understand," he said slowly, grappling with the reality he had created. "I'm committed to changing this. We need to restore the trust and unity we once had. But trust is fragile, and rebuilding it takes time." Days turned into weeks, and although Lucas made genuine efforts to connect with his employees, hosting lunches, initiating team-building activities, he sensed a lingering skepticism. Each time he reached out, it felt like he was wading through an invisible barrier, a wall built by years of unacknowledged loyalty and sudden betrayal. One evening, as Lucas was reviewing reports in his office, a notification on his phone caught his attention. It was a post from a popular local blog featuring an article titled "The Fall of Hargrove and Company," a cautionary tale. Lucas's heart raced as he read through the piece, which detailed not only Margaret's dismissal, but also the growing unrest among employees. It painted a picture of a company unraveling due to leadership decisions that had forsaken its foundational values. Feeling exposed and vulnerable, Lucas knew he had to act swiftly. He decided to reach out to Margaret once again. "I need your help," he admitted during their call. "The company is suffering, and I want to make it right. Can you help me understand how to rebuild trust?" Margaret's response was thoughtful. "It starts with acknowledging the past, Lucas. You can't simply gloss over what happened. The team needs to know you understand the weight of your decisions. You have to lead with humility." With renewed determination, Lucas organized a town hall meeting, inviting all employees to voice their concerns openly. He was nervous, acutely aware that this was a critical moment. As he stood in front of the gathered crowd, he felt the weight of their gazes. "I stand before you today to acknowledge my mistakes," he began, his voice steady but vulnerable. "I failed to recognize the value of the people who make this company great. I realize that my decisions have consequences beyond what I could measure in profit margins." The room was silent, tension palpable, as employees leaned in to hear him. Margaret, You are a part of this company's history, and I want to invite you back to help us rebuild. I need your perspective to guide us forward." Margaret stood at the back, surprised yet touched by the invitation. As she stepped forward, a murmur of surprise swept through the crowd. "Thank you, Lucas," she said, her voice filled with warmth. "I appreciate your willingness to listen. Together, we can foster a culture that values each person's contribution." As the meeting progressed, employees began to share their stories, recounting experiences that had shaped their connection to Hargrove and Company. Each narrative unveiled the richness of their collective history, and Lucas felt the walls around him begin to crumble. The stories reminded him of why his father had founded the company, not just to sell furniture, but to create a community. In the weeks that followed, Margaret returned not just as a symbol of redemption, but as a vital voice in reshaping the company culture. Together, she and Lucas implemented initiatives focused on employee engagement, community outreach, and recognition of long-serving staff. The more they collaborated, the more Lucas recognized the invaluable lessons that had eluded him during his initial tenure as CEO. Yet, just as things seemed to be on the right track, Lucas was reminded that the path to redemption is rarely straightforward. Employees were still wary, and rumors continued to swirl. Lucas felt the pressure mounting, and he knew that to truly mend the fractures within Hargrove and Company, he would have to confront not just the business challenges, but also the emotional wounds he had caused. The realization struck him hard. True leadership was about vulnerability and accountability. He could no longer hide behind spreadsheets and financial reports. Lucas was beginning to understand that the greatest risk he could take was to open his heart to his team and truly embrace the essence of the legacy he had inherited. As the days progressed, the stage was set for a transformation, one that would challenge Lucas's resolve and ultimately redefine what it meant to be the leader of Hargrove and Company. He was on the brink of a journey that would unveil not only the strength of his employees, but also the core of his own character. With Margaret's return, Hargrove and Company began to experience a slow but palpable shift. Employees who had once felt neglected started to engage more actively. The atmosphere in the office transformed, the heavy fog of uncertainty lifting, giving way to a sense of hope and camaraderie. As Lucas continued to foster open communication, he felt a sense of warmth and belonging growing among his colleagues. It was as if they were collectively embarking on a journey toward redemption. Lucas decided to implement regular feedback sessions, where employees could voice their concerns and suggestions without fear of retribution. "We need to hear from everyone," he declared during one of their first sessions. "Your insights are invaluable to our success." He was surprised to see how eager employees were to share their thoughts, bringing forth ideas that had been buried under the weight of previous decisions. During one of these sessions, Samantha stood up and proposed a community outreach program. "We should reconnect with the neighborhood and show that we care," she suggested passionately. "Organizing workshops and events could help rebuild our image and strengthen our ties to the community." The room erupted in applause, and Lucas felt a swell of pride as the energy shifted from despair to purpose. The outreach program quickly became a cornerstone of the company's renewed identity. Lucas, along with Margaret and several enthusiastic employees, began planning events to engage the local community. They hosted furniture-making workshops where they invited children and families to participate. It was a simple yet effective way to demonstrate that Hargrove and Company was more than just a business. It was a family committed to sharing its craft. However, not all feedback was positive. Lucas knew that some employees still harbor resentment towards the recent past. One day, during a particularly candid session, a longtime employee named Carl stood up, his voice shaking with emotion. "I appreciate what you're trying to do, Lucas, but it's hard to forget how Margaret was treated. Many of us feel that our loyalty was thrown away. How can we trust that it won't happen again?" Lucas felt the weight of Carl's words. "You're right," he acknowledged. "Trust takes time to rebuild, and I understand that my actions have consequences. I'm committed to making amends and proving that I value each of you." As he spoke, he realized he couldn't just offer words. He needed to back them up with consistent actions. Margaret, sensing the tension, stood beside Lucas. "Trust is a two-way street," she said gently. "It's about transparency, open communication, and mutual respect. Let's work together to establish a new foundation based on these principles." Her words resonated with the team, reinforcing the need for collective healing. As the community outreach program gained momentum, the office began to feel different. Employees who had once felt disconnected were now united in a common purpose. They participated in local charity events, organized donation drives, and even collaborated with schools to teach children about craftsmanship. Each event not only strengthened the bonds among employees, but also reestablished Hargrove and Company's reputation in the community. Yet, as the company began to flourish, Lucas found himself grappling with a different challenge: managing the expectations of the board. During a quarterly meeting, the financial reports painted a mixed picture. While community engagement was thriving, profits had not yet rebounded to pre-cut levels. The board members were becoming restless, questioning Lucas's commitment to their traditional profit-driven model. "Lucas," one board member pressed, "how long can we afford to prioritize community outreach over financial performance? We need results, and we need them soon." The pressure weighed heavily on him. He understood their concerns, but he also believed in the power of building relationships and trust. Determined to strike a balance, Lucas proposed a new strategy. "I suggest we integrate our outreach efforts with our business objectives. If we showcase our craftsmanship through community projects, we can attract new customers and enhance our brand's visibility." The room erupted in discussion, with some board members skeptical but intrigued by the idea. With renewed resolve, Lucas set out to create a marketing campaign that would highlight the company's commitment to both quality craftsmanship and community values. He enlisted the help of his team, encouraging them to share their stories and experiences with customers. Together, they crafted a message that resonated deeply. Hargrove and Company was not just a business. It was a family invested in the well-being of its employees and the community. As the campaign rolled out, Lucas felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. Would the community respond? Would the board be satisfied with the results? Time would tell, but for the first time in months, he felt hopeful. The journey toward rebuilding trust and community ties had begun to yield results, and he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Little did he know, the path to redemption would soon lead him to confront the consequences of his earlier decisions in ways he had never anticipated. As the community embraced a new vision for Hargrove and Company, Lucas found himself standing at the precipice of a deeper understanding of leadership and legacy, one that would challenge him to rise above his previous mistakes and fully embrace the values his father had instilled in him. The momentum generated by Hargrove and Company's community outreach program began to bear fruit. Customers returned, drawn in by the stories of the company's renewed commitment to craftsmanship and connection. Lucas felt a swell of pride as he watched employees engage with customers, sharing their passion for furniture making and showcasing the products that were more than just items for sale. They were symbols of a community coming together. However, amidst the positive changes, a looming shadow cast over Lucas's growing optimism. The board remained skeptical, their eyes trained on the bottom line, eager for profits to reflect the revitalization they had heard so much about. Despite the uplifting events and engaged employees, financial results were slow to improve, and Lucas could sense the tension in the boardroom during their regular meetings. One fateful afternoon, Lucas received an unexpected call from the board chair, James. "Lucas, we need to talk," he said, his tone grave. "We're concerned about the direction the company is heading. We need a plan to increase profitability and fast." Lucas felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He understood their concerns, but believed in the long-term value of what they were building. "James, I assure you that our outreach initiatives are making an impact. We're reconnecting with our customers in meaningful ways," he argued, but his voice faltered as he spoke. "Impact is great, but we need tangible results," James replied sharply. "We can't afford to continue operating at a loss. If you can't demonstrate significant progress in the next quarter, we'll have to reconsider your position as CEO. The finality of James's words echoed ominously in Lucas's mind. The weight of the ultimatum pressed heavily on him as he hung up the phone. He felt torn between two worlds: the values he wanted to uphold and the relentless pressure to meet financial expectations. He knew he had to make a choice, and it needed to be the right one for his sake and for the company. That evening, Lucas sat in his office, a storm of thoughts swirling in his mind. He replayed the conversations he had with employees, the laughter shared during community events, and the warmth that had returned to the workplace. But could he protect that spirit while also satisfying the board's demands? After much deliberation, he realized that he needed to have an honest conversation with Margaret. She had been a guiding force during this journey, and he felt she could offer the insight he desperately needed. He found her at the workshop, where she was overseeing a group of children learning to craft their own pieces of furniture. The sight warmed his heart and reinforced his resolve. "Margaret," he began, pulling her aside, "I've been feeling the pressure from the board to increase profitability, and I'm worried about what that might mean for the changes we've made. I don't want to lose the connection we've built with the community." Margaret nodded, understanding the weight of his concerns. "Lucas, remember that change takes time. While it's important to meet financial goals, you also have to trust the process. The relationships you're fostering are just as valuable as the numbers on a spreadsheet, but perhaps we can find a way to combine both." Her words sparked an idea. What if we host a community event specifically designed to showcase our furniture and craftsmanship? We could invite local influencers and potential clients, making it a celebration of what we stand for. Margaret's eyes lit up with enthusiasm, and Lucas felt a surge of hope. As they began to plan the event, Lucas saw the enthusiasm return to his team. The entire company rallied together, each department contributing to make the showcase a success. Employees took pride in their roles, knowing that their efforts would not only benefit the company, but also honor the community they had come to cherish. The day of the event arrived, and Lucas stood before the beautifully arranged displays, filled with handcrafted pieces that told stories of craftsmanship and dedication. The community turnout exceeded his expectations, and as people mingled, sharing laughter and admiration for the work, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. However, just as the event reached its peak, Lucas spotted James among the crowd, his expression unreadable. Lucas approached him, his heart racing. "What do you think?" he asked, trying to gauge the board chair's reaction. James looked around, taking in the atmosphere before meeting Lucas's gaze. "It's impressive," he admitted reluctantly, "but I still need to see the numbers improve. This needs to translate into sales." The pressure mounted once again, but Lucas refused to let doubt overshadow the positive energy in the room. He knew this event was a turning point, not just for the company's reputation, but for its identity. "We'll make it work," he promised James, his voice steady. "This is just the beginning." As the evening unfolded, Lucas felt the collective heartbeat of Hargrove and company returning to life. Employees celebrated the fruits of their labor. Customers connected with the brand, and community members expressed gratitude for the company's renewed commitment to its roots. It was a glimpse into what the future could hold. Yet, as the night drew to a close, Lucas realized that the challenges ahead would not disappear overnight. The reckoning with the board and the lingering skepticism from some employees still awaited him. But for the first time, he felt empowered to face those challenges head-on. The journey of rebuilding trust and integrity within Hargrove and Company was far from over, but Lucas was ready to embrace the uncertainties that lay ahead, knowing that true transformation often requires navigating the storm before finding calm. Enjoy the story. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. Share your thoughts in the comments and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next thrilling episode. See you in our next video. Take care.